We've been hearing about the dry spells, the drought-like conditions that several parishes are currently facing. We are blessed here in Kingston. Just earlier this week, we had some drops, but we really have been facing the dry spell in Kingston as much as everybody else in the wider Jamaica. But there's still not enough waters to fill our rivers, to fill our dams. And today, we have Mr. Charles Buchanan, who is the Corporate Public Relations Manager of the National Water Commission, here with us on Studio 58A Live. Of course, I'm your guest, Vanessa Silvera, and I just want to thank you for joining us. Remember, if you have questions, this is an interactive session. If you have questions, please drop it in, and we will be sure to ask. Also, remember to share, like, post. All right, let's get right into it, Mr. Buchanan. Hi, welcome.
Thank you very much. My pleasure being here. I was about to join your statement about the rains we've had, sprinklings. We've had earlier this week here in Kingston to say mercy drops on us are falling, but we kind of need some more showers.
We really do.
But yes, we're in a situation at the moment where the National Water Commission is faced with about 80 of our water supply systems across the country in different parishes have been severely impacted by the dry, hot conditions. This stretch across a number of different parishes and is mainly affecting our small spring sources, those areas that are fed from small springs. Many of them are being impacted by the drought conditions. In some extreme cases where we have seen an entire source drying up, as in the case of Higgintown in St. Anne, where that entire facility, the source there, has dried up entirely. In other places, we have seen major reductions as much as 90%, as in the case of the Turtle Crawl system, the spring there in Portland, that has gone down by 90%. We also have other systems that have seen 80% and 75% reduction in different parishes. So at the moment, 8 of our systems in Portland are severely affected by drought, 10 of our systems in St. Mary, 9 of our systems in St. Anne, 7 of our systems in St. Thomas, 12 of our systems in Clarendon, and 22 of our systems here in Kingston and St. Andrew have been severely impacted by drought conditions. Then some other parishes you have a 1 or 2, but those are the areas in which we have had the worst impact.
Sounds like the drought is really concentrated in the east and northeast sections of the island.
And south, yes.
And, right. So, for example, in Frankfield, Clarendon, we've...
Indeed. In Clarendon, there are 12 of the systems, and Frankfield being one of them. The Inontown system there, for example, has gone down by 80%. The Drummond Spring system has gone down by 75%. And the Frankfield Spring, as well as the Rock River Spring, have both gone down by 65%.
To 65% or by? By 65%.
Right. So all of those percentages that I have given indicate the percentage by which we have seen a decline, meaning in effect that the remaining percentage would be the volume of water we are receiving. So there's a 100% decline at Higgintown. There's a 90% at Turtle Crawl.
Wait, when you say 100% decline, you mean
that means it dry up.
Full stop, just
yes,
dry.
There's no water in virtually coming from that facility. In the case of Turtle Crawl in Portland, for example, it's gone down to the extent that by 90%, and we are now using 10% of what we normally receive to serve our customers. That remaining 10% is what we are now forced to use to serve 100% of customers, plus a significant additional demand from persons who are not customers and who would not normally be demanding water from the NWC, but because of the drought conditions, they are now turning to the NWC as their source of supply, which is another feature of the dry-hot conditions that I need to speak to. Not only do we have a problem where we have significant decline in the volume of water available to us at our sources, but the conditions we're experiencing also result in a significant increase in the demand for water from NWC supplied systems. So in a parish like St. Elizabeth, for example, where most of our sources in St. Elizabeth are underground well sources, they have not seen major declines in the volume of water that we are receiving at those locations.
Which parish?
In St. Elizabeth.
Okay.
The same would be true for much of Manchester. So we are still putting out near either the same volume as we were doing months ago or very near to that. The problem, though, is that there are many persons who are now turning to the NWC, persons who would, under other conditions, get their water needs, or at least some of their water needs, being satisfied from other sources. Let's say there is a spring in the community that people used to use to water their animals, or used to take some water from a pond in somebody's back of their property. When those dry up, they now turn to the NWC not only to deal with their normal domestic needs, but they also now want to use the NWC supplied water to water their animals, to water their crops, to irrigate their fields, and to do all the other things they need water for.
So you're saying that there's a strain on the system?
Absolutely. The NWC systems are portable water supply systems designed to meet normal domestic and commercial needs. They're not designed to meet those normal commercial and domestic water supply needs, plus irrigation needs or farming needs. And as we know, farming is, certainly in the way in which most of us practice farming in Jamaica, is very water intensive. So there are persons who have made illegal connections to our networks, and during these times of drought, they take the water even to operate sprinkler systems, to do overhead watering of their fields. There are others who make similar connections and turn it into their fields to flood their fields. Those kinds of things will drain a water supply system of its water in no time. And apart from the illegality of it, it creates a significant drain on the volume of water left in the system to be able to meet people's normal domestic needs. So the basic point I made there is that in addition to the reduction in the output from some of our facilities at about 20% of our systems across the country, we also have a significant increase in the water demand that causes a deficit between our ability to supply to meet that extraordinary increase in demand.
All right. Let's move a little bit into the situation of lock-offs. Because you are now being stressed, the system is now being stressed, and you have to preserve water and regulate it or re-regulate it. Talk about some of the water preservation and conservation measures that the NWC is undertaking.
Right. As part of a normal drought management scenario, there are several steps that we always take. And certainly, yes, one of them is regulation or rationing of the existing supplies. So let's say, for example, you are served by the turtle crawl system in Portland. Let's use that as an example. Or you're served by the Constant Spring Water Supply System, which gets its water from the Hermitage Dam, which has declined to just be just over 40% at the moment. So you're served by one of these systems. If we're forced to regulate the supply because the amount of water which remains available to us at this time is not adequate to meet all the needs that are there, so you sometimes decide that we will only be able to supply some communities sometimes and other communities at other times. So depending on where you are on the network, we will set up a schedule that says a portion of the service area from this water supply system will be served on Mondays and others will not get water on Mondays. Then we go to the other areas which didn't get on Mondays and we say you will get on Tuesdays, whilst the others who are getting on Monday would be without. And so you regulate the supply in those ways. On the Hermitage Constant Spring system, we do a form of regulation, but based on the nature of that system, how we do the regulation is to say that there will be nightly restrictions. No water will be supplied from this system during the nights. We will allow the water which would have otherwise been used to stay in the network and be available for use the following day.
All right. It seems like you are... Is there... What kind of thought goes into determining which communities get on which days and so on?
It has to be system specific. So while we have, let's say there are about 5 to 10 major ways of treating with the drought in the water utilities arsenal, but each one has to be tailored specifically based on the nature of the water supply system we're dealing with and how that system is laid out and the extent to which it has been impacted by the drought conditions. So for example, a system that has only seen a reduction by 40% in the amount of water being available may not need the same level of regulation than a system that has seen an 80% reduction in its volume will require. It also, the physical layout of the network. Do we have different pipelines coming from the source going in different directions so that you can easily separate one area from the other in terms of how they are served? Do you have a storage system, a raw water storage system that is sufficient to allow you to store the water which is coming into the system? Or do you have a run-of-the-river system that if you choose not to use the water now, you don't have it because it's gone down the river or away from the spring source? So it depends on a number of specific variables in terms of how we do the regulation. And we try and match it to the specific circumstances. In some instances, for example, you have nearby systems that are interconnected to a drought-affected system, as in the case of Kingston and St. Andrew. Most of our systems in Kingston and St. Andrew are integrated, interconnected. So we can serve some areas that normally receive their water from the constant spring water supply system can be served by water from another system, like the Mona water supply system, for example. So one of the measures we have already implemented and are continuing to expand the implementation of is the extent to which we take some of the communities which normally depend on Constant Spring, Hermitage as their sources of water, and we are serving them from other systems, the Constant Spring system, as well as from expanded outputs that we are having from the White Marl system. So it depends on a number of specific variables that have to be taken into account in setting up the response. We know that there will be some areas that will not be able to be supplied with water via the pipe when there is a significant drought on. And so those areas are usually areas we target to say, let's do trucking to those worst affected areas to which we are unable to get water in the pipes. and those are usually scheduled for trucking.
All right, so we have diversion of water and trucking as two measures by the NWC. Just to take some comments online, Weedy Shields from Washington, D.C. Hello, thanks for joining us. We have Richard Patey, who is concerned that every time you lock off the water, you don't give them no notice. Now, I want you to talk about the kind of public education that you go out and employ. For example, online to say, you know, we're going to have water lockoffs at this point in these communities. What are some of the public education methods that you employ to ensure that disgruntled customers like Richard Patey don't say, yo, you lock off my water, you're not telling me nothing?
All right. Let me answer that. We do issue news releases, for example, about the establishment of drought measures and the restrictions in supply. So from last week, we have publicly advised of the fact that nightly restrictions have commenced on the constant spring system, and no one served by the constant spring system should be expecting to have water during the nighttime hours. Okay. So we issue news releases. We make public statements. We work with the media closely, do interviews, and are engaged in fora like we are right now. Just today, our president was on television. I have been on several programs indicating what we are doing. We use our social media programs. We have it placed on our website. But I do accept that none of the measures that we have implemented will ever make it so that persons are always fully advised in advance of these measures. And that's an ongoing challenge. What we also do, though, I want to point out that the measures I have already indicated in terms of trucking of water and regulation of supplies are only two of the several things that we undertake. Even before coming to regulating and trucking of water, we seek to develop access to additional sources of water wherever they are available to augment the supplies that we have, and to especially where it can fit into a particular system that is down. So I give two examples that customers may not notice the difference. We have just recently, weeks ago, put in place an additional well source at White Marl, which is now able to give us some additional 800,000 gallons of water per day to add to the system available supplies in Kingston and St. Andrew to make up for the shortfall we are having on the Hermitage Constant Spring system. Right. We have similarly, but we haven't made a lot of noise about that because that's filling the gap. We have similarly up in rural St. Andrew, there is a new system that we had put in place just earlier this year, so that areas like Rock Hall, which would normally be seriously impacted by the drought conditions, while that source up in that area has gone down, the customers are not feeling the level of impact they would have otherwise felt because we have put in place this additional system. The same is true over in St. Mary. At the Ita Boreal facility, which serves a large area in central and eastern St. Mary, we have the system has gone down by 70%. We only have 30% of the water from IB to serve the customers there. But thankfully, we had installed a new well, which we are now able to have augment the supply to wide areas, including Islington and Highgate and some of those surrounding areas.
This is the second well I've heard you mention. Are there any other wells recently dug?
There are several other wells in our system, And yes, there are more that we are either looking to build into the system or to have return into operation, because that's one of the issues. During periods of drought, normally the situation is that your well sources are the ones that serve you better. They're less impacted by drought conditions than your surface water sources, and it's certainly they're more resilient than your sources like your springs.
All right. So the question is, it seems like the situation is the same each year. When we have dry spells, people get their waters locked off and there's nothing they can do about it, and it seems to be the same old song over and over again. Is this true?
I know it feels that way, and I understand the frustration that the public and the customers feel in this regard, because yes, we are affected by dry seasons many years. The truth, though, is that we didn't have a drought last year. We didn't have drought conditions impacting our systems last year. The year before, we probably go back to 2015 for the last major drought impact that impacted some of these areas. It also is to be noted that drought impacts also vary, because some of the places that are impacted in one year are not impacted in another year. So at the moment, for example, the western parishes, by and large, are doing very, very good. I only have one system that's being affected by drought conditions in Trelawney, for example. The western parishes, as I say, are doing fairly well at the moment. The other issue, though, is that every year with worsening climate change conditions means that the natural conditions are probably going to get worse. So we are told by all the climate specialists that we are to expect more irregularity in the supply of, in the rainfall that we receive, which will in turn severely impact our water supply resources.
So what's the word from the Met Service in terms of how much longer this is going to last?
Unfortunately, the word has not been very comforting to us. They have indicated that we are to expect not only that we will have a dry season, but that we will have to have a drier than normal dry season. They've indicated that the problem is compounded by several other things. So there is the African dust phenomenon, which is causing the times to be even hotter, and also reducing the likelihood of the rainfall. It's also very windy, so wind also makes the demand for water greater, and it causes greater levels of evaporation and transpiration from our facilities. So the way in which the Met Office has not given us a very comforting word. They say expect more dry conditions.
All right, just to explain to our listeners and viewers, the Saharan dust that Mr. Buchanan is referring to, we've had several million tons of Saharan dust blow over into our atmosphere, affecting our conditions, making it drier and hotter than previous years. And this, as he was saying, is just part of the whole climate change. Is very real. This is evidence that we are in changing times.
Absolutely. And all the climate specialists indicate that in addition to the increased irregularity in rainfall, where you're going to have longer, drier spells, and then you will have torrential rain at other times, they also indicate that you're going to have sea level rise, which itself poses a challenge, especially to those sources of fresh water that we have near to the coast. So saline intrusion will become an increasing challenge for the Water Commission. Not only is that a problem for us at Fairy Hill in Portland and Rockfort in Kingston, or some other facility down in Clarendon, but it is projected that those coastal supplies for underground water are likely to be increasingly threatened, which is one of the reasons why a few years ago the National Water Commission invested more than $1.2 billion in what we refer to as the Aquifer Recharge Project, where essentially we have spent these funds to pump raw water in the St. Catherine Plains into sinkholes and into wells that we have dug, to pump it into the ground so that we can protect the reliability and the long-term sustainability of us pulling out water from elsewhere in the parish.
All right, just before you continue, you mentioned raw water. Just explain to our viewers what you mean by raw water.
Sorry, by raw water I simply mean water as it exists in the natural environment from which we... So the water in the condition you see it in the rivers, it's not yet treated, it's not yet been put through any process. So water as it exists in the natural environment prior to treatment is the way I use it for.
All right, let's take some questions from social media. Richard, I need to know which parish you are from so that we can put it to Mr. Buchanan. Javon Gale from Orange Park in St. Anne says they're having a problem having to pay up to, is this $12,000 or is it $1,200? Let me know, to get their drums filled. And this is happening while, okay, this happens every year at this time. Javon Gale. So persons who get water trucked to their communities have to pay for it? Could you?
All right. In the parish of St. Anne, let me say that we have all these systems that are severely impacted by drought conditions. I mentioned Higgintown before. I should also mention Seville, Avisfield, Chester, New Ground, Content, Dawson Town, Fort George, and Beverly. These are spring sources which supply multiple communities. So I wouldn't be sure which one may be the one that might serve the listener, viewer. But with those systems being impacted, it's quite possible that a customer connected to one of these would not be able to get water. The short answer to the question of when the National Water Commission sends and pays for a truck to deliver water to our customers, that customer ought not to pay for what the NWC has contracted to be delivered to the customer at no cost. However, if the customer has no water, there are private operators we know who are in the business of doing private supplies. So a private arrangement can be engaged for persons to receive the water that they need. But when we pay for a truck to go into the community and deliver to our customers should not pay for that water.
All right. Let's just move a little bit into the talk about how you service the dam and the possible desilting of the dams. Because, for example, with Hermitage, there have been talks about how much silt is at the bottom, which can never really allow the water to get all the way down. And there might be a problem in terms of water supply. Yeah,
there has been some misunderstanding. So yes, there is siltation affecting the Hermitage. There is no significant siltation affecting the Mona. The Hermitage, however, is an earthen dam. It's really a run-of-the-river system where basically you have made a large concrete structure across the valley where two rivers meet, the Wogwater River and the Morsham River. You block up the area and build this massive structure there, and the water coming down in the valley with the earth on the side flows into this structure that you have made. A big part of our problem is that, yes, over the many years since Hermitage was built back in the 1920s, we have had some buildup of silt in the facility. We have desilted on several different occasions, but there is consideration that there may be the need to do desilting at this time. However, we also need to bear in mind what will desilting do for us and not be mistaken into believing that desilting the Hermitage will solve the water supply problems relating to that issue.
It won't?
If
you have less silt, then you have more water. If you have more water, then the supply to your customers will be
not
more.
Quite. If we do not have a reliable source of water continuing to flow into the dam, you're having a larger storage capacity at the dam will only mean that it will be more half empty or unfilled more of the time than not. It's perhaps the analogy I use is someone who has very limited stream of funds and they only get their money from their limited salary, and they have 2 bank accounts, and you tell them that they need to expand and get a few more bank accounts. Doesn't mean that they'll have more money by having multiple. So most times when persons are saying we need to get more dams, get more reservoirs, it by itself is not the solution. That's the short answer. It requires us to also have a supporting infrastructure and a supporting natural environment that would allow for more water to be sustainably delivered to whatever storage reservoir or dam you build. So, in addition, the consideration of what the amount of money you will need to spend, probably you would be better served looking at an alternative solution that may yield you more water. For example, we are determined to proceed with the construction of a 15 million gallons per day capacity water treatment plant on the Rio Cobra River, which is a reliable source of water, and then connect that to transmission pipelines that can take it to other parts of St. Catherine, as well as take it into Kingston. That would be 15 million gallons more of water. It's better to spend that money than to seek to expand a Hermitage reservoir when the Wogwater and Morsham rivers and Ginger rivers that are connected to the Hermitage Dam have been showing continuous decline over the years, and they are not sustaining a larger capacity reservoir.
So, okay, go back to the Rio Cobra facility.
Yes.
When did you start building it? When can we expect it to be completed?
We haven't started building it yet. We're going through the process of finalizing the public-private partnership arrangement. We're getting all the requisite government approvals that are needed for it. And it is expected that when we sign off on that, I think it's within 24 months, that facility will be available to provide 15 million gallons of additional water. As it is at the moment, for Kingston and St. Andrew, the major project which we had identified that was most needed to deal with the short and long-term needs of a stronger, more resilient water supply network in Kingston and St. Andrew is the non-revenue water reduction program that we're doing right now. That program started in 2.5 years ago, and we have been working on it. We are now halfway through with the implementation of that program, and we are already seeing significant benefits for it. For example, I'll give you one benefit that we've already seen. Most of the customers served by the Mona water supply system, and indeed all of the customers served by the Mona water supply system, have not seen a disruption this year as a result of any drought conditions. And a part of the reason for that is that we have already done some of the non-revenue water reduction work on the Mona water supply system. So at the moment, that facility is now at 94% of its capacity. Fantastic storage levels. It's not normal for you to have the Mona being at 94% at the same time when you have the Hermitage at 42%. In part because of the work we have done, and we have seen significant results. Unfortunately, we need to complete some more of that type of work on the Constant Spring side of the network to enable us to have the same situation where both reservoirs, regardless of the rainfall levels in the recent weeks or months, would still be at a high level.
So you mentioned the benefits, but this non-revenue water that you are trying to solve with this new partnership with Maya, it is, right?
Yes,
with
it is.
Maya.
Yes. Our
Leads
co-management partners, yes.
Leads to an increase in water rates. So
I was eyeing because I thought you were going to first say that it is increasing the disruptions in the short term.
All right, so let's talk about the disruption.
Yes,
okay.
Indeed. It is indeed creating significant disruption to our customers in the short term. So we have been saying, advertising wildly and saying every chance we get that please bear with us in Kingston and St. Andrew because we are having to disrupt your service in order to put in place the kind of system that will be better able to serve you in the future. So right now, we are building out, we're remaking, as it were, much of the 1,600 kilometers of the pipeline network. So we are having people who are doing night and day physical checks using specialist acoustic devices to look for leaks that are there under the ground that are not coming to surface, what we refer to as non-visible leaks, so that we can find them, stop those leaks, and not have the precious commodity go to waste. We're having to install some 2,200 new valves on the network. So you will see us at virtually all intersections all across the corporate area, having to dig, install valves on the network. And these valves are absolutely necessary to enable the system to be used more manageably, more efficiently, and to enable us to serve our customers better. But in the process, we're having to install these valves. We have installed somewhere in the region of certainly more than 1,000 loggers, data loggers on the system, which are detecting and managing the flow of water and the pressure at which it is passing different parts of the network. We're establishing some 122 different pressure zones and several different DMAs, we call it.
DMAs?
Yeah, they're district metered areas where you break the network into pieces, essentially, so that for manageability purposes, so you can shut down in one DMA or in one pressure zone without having to shut down the entire network. So let's say you have a break and you have a leak that you have to fix, and you go in, you can fix that leak, turn off the water in this particular area, in this particular zone, without disrupting the supply to all the customers in faraway parts of the same water supply system. You can isolate it and manage, and you can see what pressure levels you have in different parts of the network. So in in several ways, these activities will help us greatly. But in the interim, unfortunately, there are many unavoidable disruptive impacts. So customers, for example, today being Thursday, tonight we will shut down the Mona water supply system to allow us to do a lot of major work on that system. So there will be about 10 different crews who will be teams who will be going out during the course of tonight to work on the Mona system while it is shut down and customers are not getting any water. Every day we have several teams that are out there in the field trying to work as expeditiously as possible to bring the best possible service to our customers.
All right, so Mona customers, you need to brace for a lock-off tonight.
And every Thursday night for a little while. Yeah.
Okay, so how long is this work expected to last?
Certainly we're continuing to do works like this for the next 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
The overall program continues for the next 2.5 years. However, the most disruptive phase, which is where we are at now, is where we are building out the major parts of it, which require the systems being shut down at different points in time.
So you're saying
we're going through that now. So
you're saying next year, if next year this time we're going to be seeing less water lock-offs as a result of this non-revenue water initiative.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's go back to the point where persons are going to have to start paying higher water bills.
Well, and that might be for a number of reasons, because the Commission does recognize one of the issues we're doing under this NRW program is we're replacing as many of the meters that we have out there in the field. Many of the meters that we have out there in the field are old, and as the meters get older, they slow down like people do. Their joints, their moving parts don't work as well, and they begin to under-register. So if you don't replace your meters, you are likely to see a meter that tells you that you should charge a person for 3,000 gallons of water this month, but the person actually used 5,000 gallons. But because the meter is not working as accurately, it tells you that it's only 3. So what we're doing now is changing out the meters. We're also changing the type of meters to ensure that we get the most accurate, the most efficient, and the ones that are most likely to serve us for a long period of time. So the hydros meters that we are now installing, they're digital. They have several advantages both for NWC and for the customer. But among the things that we're telling our customers straight is that if your meter has been replaced, if your old meter has been taken out and a new meter is put in, expect that the new meter, which is going to register everything that you do use, its increased accuracy is going to result in your bill being more.
Which communities have you installed these meters in?
They are being installed all across the country. We have not made any deliberate distinction. We have already installed 40,000 in Kingston and St. Andrew, but then we have about 120,000 customers in Kingston and St. Andrew. So somewhere in the region of 35% of customers in Kingston and St. Andrew already have this. We're doing it and we're going to go island-wide. So new customers are expected to be given the new meters, and as we go, we will take out the older meters so that over a course of the next 5 years, we will only have the more efficient digital meters in our system.
All right, let's just take some comments and questions from Facebook. Hello, Lionel. Good afternoon, or is it good evening in the United Kingdom. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Chuck Ray, interesting comment. We'll take that into consideration. This has nothing to do with the NWC. Quincy Brown, I'm not sure where you're writing from. Quincy says, Quincy's asking about information regarding, zero purified water. I think we're going to have to get back to you. But interestingly, one of the questions was NWC was planning to bottle water. Where are you guys with those plans now? Before you answer that, let's just take Maureen Moore. Hi, Maureen. We see you. Thanks for joining us. Dion Green from London. Thank you so very much for joining us. Remember, if you have questions, now is the time to ask. Ray says, make hay while the rain falls. All right, we have another question here from Rupert Pitter. But before we get to Rupert's question, could you answer the bottled water situation?
Well,
question.
The NWC considers to have it under consideration. That's as much as I can say. There have been differing views as to whether the Commission should go this route. And a final decision has not been made yet, or direction as to exactly how we will go this route. Some considerations are still underway at the highest levels in the Commission.
All right, Dion, we overstepped your question. She's suggesting that more dams and micro dams need to be established island-wide, and you addressed that earlier. Would you like to go into more detail?
just simply to say that while dams may be good to have on your system, they are not in many cases absolutely essential to the supply of your water. For example, I make the simple case that NWC has some 450 different water supply systems across the country. We only have 2 dams.
Okay.
So the other 448 systems that we have across the country are serving customers without having dams or large raw water storage reservoirs connected to them. So the more essential question that one needs to bear in mind is, how reliable is the source from which you are getting the water that you're getting, and how readily available or near it is to your customers that you can distribute it without difficulty.
All right. If you've just joined us, you're watching Studio 58A live on Facebook. That's JIS's discussion program on social media. I'm your host, Vanessa Silvera, and our guest has been the corporate PR manager for the NWC, that's the National Water Commission, Charles Buchanan. And we're looking at water lockoffs and the dry spell and how NWC is dealing with this and continuing to serve its customers. Picking up on the point, before we go to Rupert's question, picking up on the point where you mentioned new meters being installed. Dion Green has a question. Where are you calling from, or where are you messaging from, Dion? She says, will these meters register air as water, as is evident in some parts of Dalville St. Thomas, where we get bills but we are not getting any water? Can you address that?
All right. The new meters will not, I repeat, the new meters will not measure air. And that's one of the specific reasons why they were chosen. They have been proven to assist greatly in eliminating that area of confusion and contention with customers. A separate issue though, over in Dalville, in many instances, we have customers who are on flat rate, who are not metered, and they will be, based on the nature of the agreement, they are charged for a specific volume of estimated usage each month. In those kinds of scenarios, if you did not receive water this month, or the particular month in question, you would still be sent a bill based on the nature of that agreement. But if you use twice the amount of water than we estimate under the agreement that you will be using, you will still be sent the bill for the amount under the agreement. So let's say we didn't have any meters to supply your particular property, and we come and we say, okay, instead of it being on a metered contract basis where the meter will tell us exactly how much you use, we will say, how many people are in your family, how large will be the, and we'll look at that and say, we will estimate that you will use 5,000 gallons each month.
Okay.
We make a calculated differential and give the customer the benefit of saying, we estimate that they will use 5, but we will charge them in the agreement for 4.
Okay.
But if that, so every month your bill will come calculated on the basis that you use 4,000 gallons of water.
Right.
But if your family were to increase, or if you were to use water in a wasteful manner, and you actually used 8 or 10,000 gallons during that month, your bill will still say, we're charging you for 4,000 gallons.
What kind of thought goes into determining who gets that benefit or that privilege versus who doesn't?
And actually, that's part of the reason why we have ordered some 450,000 of these new meters, because we're saying we will meter everybody. But previously, there would have been instances in which we didn't have the meters available, but we still needed to provide the customer with the service. And the NWC Act does allow for that. We also have areas where we have particular challenges in accessing our meters. So some of those considerations would have been made in relation to areas we cannot readily access to do meter reading, or we simply did not have meters available to be able to do that. And that's been part of the historical background against which we are operating. As at now, the Commission's commitment is to meter all supplies so that there would be no such issue.
All right, it's almost time to wrap. But one of the questions that has been recurring is the situation where NWA, that's the National Works Agency, comes in, fixes the road, and then the NWC comes and pulls it up, digs it up. One instance actually had a customer saying the day after NWA was finished with the road, the NWC came in and did their thing. Now, is there no communication or coordination between the two agencies to say we're going to be working on this road to kind of prevent this thing from happening and recurring?
All right, I answer that in two ways, because it's a strong public perception. But may I just throw into the mix that when you do road improvement work, and especially when you use heavy equipment on pipes that are old and underneath the surface, chances are those heavy equipment, those rollers, are going to cause some disturbance to the pipes that are there. And in many instances, we have seen the situation where the road is widened, so the pipe that used to be on the soft shoulder is now under the driving surface for the roadway. Or the road is about the same, but it has been repaved. But while you were repaving it, you had these heavy-duty rollers rolling over pipes that are 6 inches or whatever depth, 3 feet below the surface, resulting in those pipes breaking. So in many instances, a pipe that may have been there, it was old, but it was intact. Now that you have run with the heavy equipment and done the digging up all over it, the pipe then starts to break. Sometimes the break does not show up immediately. Sometimes it shows up a few days after. And we then find a situation where the road has now been resurfaced and a leak is surfacing. And we are forced to come in and do repairs.
But
so we do have some of those issues. We cannot replace or reinstall every foot of pipeline in every area that road works is being done. What we have done though, and the public would have seen, and I ask them to take note of this, that we have made a commitment, the National Works Agency and ourselves, that we will work together in all instances where major road works are planned. They will advise us as soon as possible. We will make every effort we can together to locate the pipes, to identify what needs to be done to upgrade that piece of that pipeline infrastructure in that area, and work together in the implementation. So along Marcus Garvey Drive, the National Water Commission worked with the National Works Agency to install new pipes along the area. Along Barbican, we not only worked with them in terms of installing new water supply pipes, but we also worked with them to install new sewer pipes. So,
and you don't only lay potable water pipes, do you also lay sewage pipes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And they did that. We did it under the same contract. So the same contractor who was engaged by the National Works Agency to undertake those works was now given the task to install these water and sewage related infrastructure on behalf of the NWC. The same is being done all along Constant Spring Road. The same is being done along Hagley Park Road. And in all of those major projects in parishes outside of Kingston and St. Andrew as well, the same joined up operation is being done. But so that complaint should be a thing of the past.
So you're saying then that the NWA and the NWC are going to be working together more going forward to prevent this kind of thing from happening perpetually?
Have indeed been, and that has been our commitment. I think the public should see significant reduction in those instances. Part of the other challenge that has always been a bugbear for us is the situation where funds may be made available by central government to say, let's do this road work, but the NWC might not have the resources at the same time to find, to say, let's do the pipe. And we, the NWC, do not get funds from central government to undertake our projects. We have to rely on the revenues we collect from our paying customers. So sometimes because of difficulty in collecting the revenues, we are not able to undertake all the projects that we want to do to match those road works. So historically that has been part of our challenge.
Okay, so you're saying that the road work can continue, and then as soon as it's finished, whether or not, depending on whether or not you got enough money to undertake a specific project, chances are you will have to do work on that road.
The commitment we have made recently is that we will find a way to either find the funds or borrow the funds or collaboratively work with the National Works Agency so that the work will continue to include pipe works, and then we make arrangements for the payment at a later stage. But I just point that out to point out that there have been historical real challenges in terms of how well you can have what we refer to as the coincidence of funding.
All right, so we are going to have to wrap well over our time. So are there plans for the NWC to repair, not just repair, but properly repair roads that you dig up for?
In fact, we have gone further. We have contracted the services of the National Works Agency to say all the areas in which we have done road cuts under our projects, we will engage the National Works Agency to be the one to do the reinstatement. So right now here in Kingston and St. Andrew, we have gone in, we do the road cuts, we then turn over the list of areas we have done work to the National Works Agency, and they are following right behind us to do the compaction to their own satisfaction and to see that the reinstatement is done. It's being done by the National Works Agency and not by the National Water Commission as part of our joined up operations.
All right, so new day dawning, where you are collaborating more.
Absolutely.
And so customers will see less of the issues that have been present for years. But that's commendable, and I hope that customers will get to see less lock-offs in the future as a result of the works that you're undertaking with your private partners, as well as the increased collaboration in roadworks.
Absolutely.
Which would mean less digging up of the roadways when the NWA comes in to do work, and vice versa. Thank you so very much for coming and sharing with me, Mr. Buchanan. Thank you for engaging and answering questions from our audience, but it is time to wrap. Thank you so very much for tuning in to our discussion, especially for those of you who sent in questions, had your questions answered. Thank you. Also, if you did not have your questions answered, or after this broadcast you have further questions, just drop it in the comment box and we will do our best to get it to the NWC, who will then attempt to answer your questions.
To do so.
All right. And remember, you play an important role in our Studio 58A sessions as our audience. Drop a line, tell us who you want to see next, and we will make every effort to have them come in and share with us. We do this every Thursday on Facebook at noon. Thank you so very much for joining us, and see you next week. This has been Studio 58A Live on Facebook. I'm your host, Vanessa Silvera, and we are taking our leave. Thank you so very much, Mr. Buchanan.
Pleasure was mine.
Now and always, walk good.